I cheated to get back at my husband and tried to bring my lover into my life, but I ended up fired for sharing company files with him and abandoned by my husband. I still don't know if I deserved it. I'm going to tell it as it happened, without embellishments, without the heroic version I told myself while I was tearing a family apart. I am the one who left, the one who, in no uncertain terms, left with another man. And when I crashed, I tried to go back only to find the door closed and my ex with someone I myself had brought into the house, our nanny. Beautiful, young, punctual, big eyes, infinite patience. Camila. Yes, that Camila. Before I start telling the story, I'll lay out the basic facts as if this were a forum post. Me, 34, my ex, Daniel, 36, our daughter, Sophie, 6, Camila, 25. And the third party in the affair, my lover, Julian, 38. I worked in marketing, Daniel, in operations at a logistics company. We met in college. We married without big speeches, with simple promises. We had Sophie when I thought I had everything figured out. A career with prospects, a stable partner, a mortgaged house, and a toddler's schedule that split the day in two. That's why we hired Camila. Camila came through a recommendation. I was surprised by her composure in the interview. She didn't sell sweetness, she offered structure. Children need clear routines, she said and wrote in a notebook what I was rattling off about Sophie, that she hated carrots, that she loved puzzles, that she became unsettled when I worked late. Camila started the following Monday, and Sophie adopted her in 3 days, as if she had always been there. I thought of myself as a modern woman with my emails at 10 at night and my presentations with metrics that promised growth. Daniel was in charge of dropping off and picking up Sophie when he could. When he couldn't, Camila did everything with an efficiency that both reassured me and squeezed my chest at the same time. Sometimes when I arrived, I would find the house tidy, dinner started, and a kind silence. And me with my head vibrating like a machine. It was in that noise that Julian appeared. He was an external consultant hired by my company to speed up processes. He was introduced on a Tuesday. He smiled at me with a confidence I later learned to identify as an alarm. At that moment, I mistook it for charisma. He loved to say, "Let's not complicate what's simple." The first few days were overly long meetings that I justified as strategic alignment. The first time we went out to lunch alone, he talked more about me than about himself. "I see you're exhausted, with an engine running that no one acknowledges," he said. He looked at me as if he had found a treasure in a dark room. I hadn't felt seen like that in months. That night, when I got home, Camila was helping Sophie make a castle out of boxes. Daniel was washing dishes. "How did it go?" he asked without turning around. "Good," I replied, and my voice sounded like someone else's. I went into the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and saw a woman who had already started to cross a line, even if she didn't accept it yet. The messages with Julian started with work pretexts, continued with inside jokes, then with late-night confidences. I don't know when the last time someone called me smart was. I wrote to him and hated myself a little for the sentence, as if I needed a stranger's validation to breathe. He knew how to get in. "You are the most lucid person in that boardroom. If you were my partner, we would double our portfolio in 6 months," he replied. "Later, can I call you?" I said yes. In the first call, there was nothing a third party could point to as infidelity. An hour and a half of ideas, laughter, anecdotes. I hung up euphoric and scared. Daniel was asleep. I lay down next to him with the phone still warm. One Friday, after closing a project, Julian suggested a quick toast. We went to a bar. At the corner table, he took my hand to calm my nerves before a presentation. That minimal contact was a switch. I felt alive. I wanted to blame the routine, the dishes that didn't wash themselves, the hangover of being a mother and an employee and a partner. The truth was simpler. I wanted to feel exceptional. And when you want that, you start to justify anything. Nothing more happened that night than a kiss at the bar door. I left in a taxi with my lips burning and the excuses sharpening in my mind. I entered the silent house. Camila had left a note on the whiteboard. "Sophie ate well. She is drawing tomorrow." Daniel had put Sophie to sleep. I got into bed without showering, as if soap could really wash away what I had already decided internally. The following weeks were an orderly descent. Julian and I met in cafes, in parking lots, in the empty meeting room. The messages became explicit. I started staying late at work. Sometimes, when I arrived, Camila was still folding clothes. "Shall I heat something up for you?" she would offer. "No, thanks," I'd say, avoiding her clean gaze. Daniel started to notice, not because he was snooping, but because absence is a smell that clings to objects. "You're different," he said one night while we were trying to watch a series. "Different how?" "Like you're just passing through." I didn't know what to say. I turned off the TV. The day I completely crossed the line was a Thursday. Julian rented a studio to work without interruptions. He told me to bring my notes. I also brought my boundaries and left them at the door. I'm not going to describe the obvious. There's no need. I'll just say that when I went out into the air with my hair still damp from someone else's shower, I felt two things at once, a youthful euphoria and a guilt that I preferred to call vertigo. I sat in the car and cried for 10 minutes. Then I dried my face, put on lipstick, and drove home. Camila was sitting on the living room floor drawing with Sophie. "Look, Mommy, I made a house with 3 windows," my daughter said, running to hug me. I swallowed hard. "How beautiful," I said, and hugged her tightly, as if trying to convince myself that everything was compatible. The new fire, the house with 3 windows, the whiteboard with drawings, the served soup, the meetings, the life that wasn't falling apart because I was balancing everything. The situation escalated quickly. Julian started talking about plans. "You should leave that relationship that no longer makes you happy," he insisted. I, who was already in up to my neck, began to believe that the leap was the path to a better version of myself. "What we feel is not an accident," he would say. I repeated the phrase like a mantra. One day I said it in my kitchen in front of Daniel. "I'm seeing someone," I said. He turned off the stove without looking at me. Then he turned around. He had the face of someone burning from the inside, but not screaming. "Since when?" "A few months ago." "Are you going to leave him?" "No." Silence. Camila was with Sophie in the room reading. Daniel took a deep breath. "Are you planning to leave?" "Yes." There were no scenes. We didn't throw plates. The only violence was in the short words. I packed my things in 2 hours. I did it with the discipline with which I assembled campaigns, lists, boxes. This yes, this no. I took clothes, my laptop, a couple of books I defined as mine. I left photos. I left a blanket that Camila had knitted with Sophie. I left the wounded house and went to Julian's apartment. The first few days were a bubble. I felt I had chosen the authentic life that motivational quotes talk about. Julian cooked. He waited for me with wine. He said things like, "We are finally being honest with ourselves." He would hug me from behind while I wrote late-night emails. He found it sexy to see me so focused. I sent messages to 2 friends as a heroic tale. One told me, "If you're sure, go for it." The other didn't reply. Then reality walked through the door without asking permission. Julian had debts, cash flow issues. He told me as if it were exactly my language. He started using my card while they pay me for the big project. I, not wanting to be the killjoy of our manifesto, agreed. The company announced cutbacks and a review of consultancies. Julian started getting hired less. His big project stretched into infinity. He started drinking more than he should to shake off the pressure. I kept telling myself, every real relationship goes through adjustments. Meanwhile, with Sophie, we made a visitation schedule that lasted as long as it took for my life to fall apart. Daniel, firmly, told me that the girl needed routines. Tuesdays and Thursdays you pick her up, alternate weekends. At first, I complied, then I started to fail. A meeting, a deadline, a crisis. "I can't today, I'll go tomorrow." Daniel stopped arguing and just sent me the week's plan. Camila would send me kind messages. "Sophie wants to show you her drawing. Can you come by tomorrow?" I would answer late. I was consumed by a spiral of work, guilt, and a partner who began to transform into a burden. One night Julian didn't come back. He showed up the next day with a confusing explanation. I stayed at a hotel because I didn't want to come home and argue. I didn't even know we were arguing. We started arguing from then on over money, over schedules, over dishes, over the phone he wouldn't put down and that I started to look at with the same hunger he had looked at me with at the beginning. I found messages with another woman. I confronted him. "And you think I'm the villain of this story?" he told me with that presentable smile he used in meetings. "If you don't like it, you can leave. You've been living off me for weeks. Don't be dramatic, it's temporary." It wasn't temporary, it was the person, and I had thrown away a stable home for someone who was showing me his unfiltered version. The day something broke that I couldn't fix, I had a meeting at Sophie's school. I met Daniel and Camila at the door. She was wearing a gray cardigan and her hair was tied up. She looked radiant in a serene way, without trying to be. Sophie ran to me, hugged me, showed me a smiley face in her notebook. "The teacher said I read better now, Mommy." We three adults sat in front of the teacher who spoke of progress and routines. Camila added precise details, schedules, sleep habits, a little tip on how Sophie concentrates better if she has oatmeal for breakfast. I nodded and felt ashamed. I promised myself I would step up. That promise lasted until the night when, after a fight with Julian over the overdue rent, I packed 2 suitcases, turned off my phone, and drove to Daniel's house. I knocked on the door with numb knuckles. The door opened and there was Camila in jeans, a white t-shirt, barefoot with her hair down. She looked at me with contained surprise. Behind her, Daniel walked from the kitchen, drying his hands. "I need to talk," I said without greeting. "Please." Daniel held my gaze. There was no anger in his expression. There was something worse. Distance. "Come in," he said, opening the door. I entered the living room that I had once decorated with blue cushions. The house smelled of soup. On the table was a half-finished puzzle. Sophie was sleeping. I could see her backpack propped up next to the sofa. I searched for words. "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I want to fix it. I want to come home." No one answered right away. Camila looked down. Daniel took a slow breath, like someone preparing a sentence they don't want to use, but have to anyway. "You can't come back," he said. "This is not your house anymore." I felt the floor tilt. I looked for a chair and couldn't find one. I clung to the backrest. "Daniel, please." My voice broke. It was a mistake. I don't even know how to say it, but it was a mistake. It was a decision, he corrected with a sharp calm. And I've already made mine. I looked at him without understanding or without wanting to understand. Then I saw them, the plates set for 2, the extra glass in the dishwasher, Camila's cardigan on the back of the chair, a discreet ring hanging from her neck on a chain I hadn't noticed before. The puzzle I didn't want to assemble hit me. "You too," I said, more like a whimper than a question. Camila finally looked up. There was no triumph in her gesture, no pity, none of the condescension I expected. There was dignity. "I'm with Daniel," she said bluntly. "We started dating a while ago. Not while you were living here." "I wasn't with your husband while you were here," Daniel added. You left a space." I didn't look for it. It happened. And I'm okay. Sophie is okay." I swallowed and the shame mixed with rage. That cloud's reason. "She was our nanny," I managed to spit out. "I brought her into this house. She was an honest worker," Daniel said. "And when everything fell apart, she stayed. Not for me, for Sophie. Over time," he shrugged. "Over time, this happened." I sat down. The tears came without permission. I didn't cry for love, at least not only for that. I cried for my wounded pride, for that feeling of having the possibility of being the one who chooses snatched away from me. My hands were shaking. "You can't do this to me," I said. "You can't." "I can't protect you from the consequences of your actions," Daniel replied. "I'm going to talk to the lawyer. We have to formalize custody, the times, the house. I want to do it peacefully. I don't want a war." Peacefully, I laughed humorlessly. "You're with the nanny, Daniel." Camila took a step towards the kitchen. "I'm going to give you space," she said. "Sophie is sleeping. Please don't wake her." "Camila, stay," Daniel requested. "There's nothing to hide." My stomach churned. I wanted to scream. I wanted to blame them for everything. I looked for a brilliant excuse, a legal argument, a flimsy detail that would give me back control. I couldn't find it. I found, instead, a list of pending bills, a nearly maxed-out credit card, a lover who that very same day had told me, "Let's not create drama, please," and my daughter in the next room, sleeping with the piece I had rented and then lost. "I need to see Sophie," I said. "Just to see her." "Tomorrow," Daniel replied. "She has school. It's late. I'm her mother." "Yes," he said. "And that's why we're going to do this right." I got up. I walked to the door as if I had aged suddenly. Camila followed me with her eyes. Daniel opened it. The cold air hit my face. "On the threshold," he added, "I suggest we talk with lawyers. I want to be fair. I'm not going to deny you, Sophie, but there's no going back." "What if we try?" I asked so quietly I could barely hear myself. "For her. The best way to think about her is not to drag her into a broken relationship," he said, and closed the door with a soft, almost kind click that hurt more than a slam. I stood on the sidewalk with my suitcases in the car, with zero plan and a life that had fallen apart in slow motion until it shattered like tempered glass. I called Julian. He didn't answer. I sent a message. "I need to stay tonight," and saw the double check that didn't change color. Driving to the apartment that was now ours seemed impossible, so I went to a roadside motel. Yes, me, who a few months ago was talking about integrated campaigns and growth, paid in cash because my cards wouldn't go through. I washed my face with a towel that smelled of cheap detergent and sat on the bed staring at the ceiling. At dawn, a message from Julian came in. "I can't right now, I'm busy with something. I'll write you later." I replied with a single word that seemed dignified to me but came out pathetic. "Okay." That morning I worked as if productivity could suture a wound. I sent emails from my phone. I ordered a coffee I didn't drink. At 10, Daniel sent me a message with a family lawyer's contact. "He's good and reasonable," he wrote. That reasonable burned me. Reasonable with the woman who left him? That's what I thought of writing. Instead, I replied, "Thanks. Can I come see Sophie at 5? "Yes, Camila will be there. I'll be home at 6. I read it 3 times as if it were hiding a trap. At 5, I rang the doorbell with cold hands. Camila opened it. She had Sophie by the hand. My daughter hugged me tightly. "Mommy, look," she said. "I won a star for reading without stumbling." "I'm so proud," I replied. And it was true. We sat on the floor. Sophie told me about recess, about a new friend. Camila was present without being intrusive. She offered me tea. She said there were cookies in the blue tin. I nodded. I thanked her without words. "Are you staying for dinner?" Sophie asked. I looked at Camila. She held my gaze with a kind neutrality that put me in my place. I was the mom asking for time, not the owner of the house. "Not today, sweetie," I told her. "I'll come pick you up tomorrow after school." "Okay." Sophie nodded and went back to her drawing, confident in the promise I had to keep no matter what, as if my life depended on it, and it did. Daniel arrived at 6:10. He brought bread. He greeted me with a naturalness I didn't recognize. Camila smiled at him, and he at her. In that simplicity was everything I had thrown away. Rhythm, routines, a domestic choreography that needs no rehearsal. I didn't want to have dinner with them. I couldn't have. I said goodbye to Sophie. I promised her about the next day. I left with a bitter taste in my mouth. That night Julian finally showed up. He opened the apartment door with the nonchalance of someone who owes no explanations. "Where have you been?" I asked, with no strength to pretend. "Working," he replied and threw himself on the couch. "What's wrong? You look like you've been to a funeral." I told him the basics. I wanted a part of him to say, "We'll fix it." Instead, he waved his hand. "Well," he said, "that was to be expected, wasn't it?" And he changed the subject. "Did you pay the electricity?" A notice came. I looked at my hands and recognized myself for the first time in months. I was someone who had mistaken a spark for a bonfire, who had believed that knocking over a board was enough to invent a new game. I had to plan, even if planning hurt. Visits, lawyer, credit cards, rent. And the dignity I had left, which wasn't much, but it was still mine. I didn't know then, although I could sense it, that this no going back would be the first link in a chain. Papers, hearings, a list of printed messages, a school report, a bank account in the red, a call from human resources that cracked me from the inside. and an ending where I don't come out victorious or saved by a moral. I'm just putting here the point where the fall really begins. Not the kiss, not the suitcase, not the closed door, but that chair at my ex's table, occupied by someone I had underestimated, who held the home together when I let it go, and who was now where I thought I could return whenever I wanted. The lawyer Daniel recommended had an unadorned office, the kind that brings you back to earth with a jolt. Her name was Laura Mendieta. She didn't have the complacent smile of someone selling you comfort. She had a folder and a pen that clicked every time she set it on the table. "What do you want to achieve?" she asked bluntly after hearing my rushed summary. "To go back to my house," I said, and as soon as I said it, I knew it wasn't a legal objective, it was a childish wish. "That doesn't exist as a legal claim," she replied. "We can talk about custody, visitation rights, division of assets. About getting back with your ex. I don't want to see my daughter anymore. Can you maintain stable schedules? Do you have a fixed address, a job?" I fell silent. Laura took off her glasses, crossed her hands. "Listen to me," she said in a tone that wasn't harsh, it was real. "The family court looks at stability, not moral punishments. And you, unfortunately, have been leaving a trail of instability. What I can do is prevent you from being reduced to supervised visits. For that, I need two things: for you to stop failing to keep to the schedules, and for you to cut off any situation that makes you look like an economic or emotional risk to the child." "I am not a risk," I protested. "I'm not saying you are," she replied. "I'm saying don't serve it to the judge on a platter. You're going to take a co-parenting course, you're going to start therapy, and you're going to document every compliance. Can you do that?" "Yes. And one more thing. Don't show up unannounced at your ex's house again. Everything in writing, clean, no scenes." She didn't use the word infidelity. She didn't have to. I left with a list. Therapy, a course, a spreadsheet to record pickups, a search engine for cheap apartments. In the parking lot, my phone rang. Human Resources. "Hi, Vanessa," said the friendly voice of Carla, the generalist. "Do you have 5 minutes for a compliance chat?" 5 minutes that stretched out like a spider web. They asked me about Julian, about the relationship with the external consultant, about the company policy that required declaring relationships that could create a conflict of interest. I hadn't declared anything. "An exchange of sensitive information outside of formal channels has been detected," Carla said, reading something. I asked for examples. They named emails I had sent myself from Julian's apartment, attachments, comments in shared documents. "We need you to come in tomorrow at 9, she concluded without frills. "Your representative can come if you wish." I didn't have a representative. I had, instead, a lover who answered evasively when I sent him screenshots. "Don't be dramatic, vain," he wrote. "That can be sorted out with a chat. Everyone does things like that. If they pressure you, just mention me as a provider and that's it." Provider. I choked on the word. That night, I went to the apartment and found him in a good mood, smelling of new cologne. "We got a compliance issue," I told him. "No preambles. They're going to review the emails. They're naming you." "Relax," he said, opening a beer. "I told you the big project was coming. In a few weeks, we'll be covered." What do they want? For us not to talk about work? What world do they live in? "In the world with policies," I retorted. "I'm not in the mood for sermons, but tomorrow they could suspend or fire me." "You're exaggerating," he said and turned on the TV. I went to the room, sat on the edge of the bed and wrote to Laura, "Possible problem at my job due to relationship with a consultant. Does it affect custody?" She replied after a while. "If you end up without income and a home, yes, you need a plan." Now, I slept badly. At 7, before going to Human Resources, I went to therapy. An office with plants and a therapist who told me her name, Mariana, and let me talk until I ran out of breath. I made decisions trying to feel alive, I blurted out, and now everything seems like a puzzle with pieces from different boxes. "What do you say to yourself when you look in the mirror?" she asked. "That I'm irresponsible," I said without a filter. "Try another phrase that allows you to move forward," she suggested. "I am someone who made bad decisions and is now taking responsibility." I didn't promise anything. I went to the company with a knot in my stomach. Carla received me with a company lawyer. Vanessa, said Carla, thanks for coming. Do you know why we called you? We're going to ask you questions and we ask for your honesty. I told them the basics. I didn't deny Julian. I didn't deny the emails. There was a file, access to folders outside of ours, sharing with a personal Gmail, messages with attachments that included cost models. This is serious, the lawyer said without malice. In the end, they gave me a document, termination for breach of policies without severance. I handed over my access card. I was left with an envelope with my things, just like in the movies. It hurts me, said Carla, standing up, but it is what it is. If you need a letter describing your achievements, I can sign it in general terms. I didn't ask for favors. I went out into the street with the sun hitting my forehead and the physical sensation of a void. I walked 3 blocks aimlessly. I called Julian. What did I tell you? I heard his voice. You exaggerated. What happened? They fired me. What do you mean they fired you? His tone changed to annoyance, as if I were the one to blame. They had no reason. You're not the only one who shares things. I shared them with the consultant I'm sleeping with, I replied. Does that seem right to you or not? Don't pin that on me, he said dryly. You're an adult, and don't involve me in your dramas with your ex and the nanny. I have enough to deal with my own cash flow. Can you help me with the rent while I find something? I asked bluntly. I was in no mood for beating around the bush. Silence. Then I told you about the big project. Don't repeat that to me. I cut him off. I hung up. I wrote to Laura. I was fired. I'll look for a room. I'll make a plan. She replied. I'm sorry. Don't miss the pickups. Document everything. That afternoon I complied. I arrived on time at Sophie's school. The teacher smiled at me with neutral kindness. At the door, Camila was with other mothers. She saw me and stepped aside so Sophie could run to me. Are we going to the park today? My daughter asked, hanging on my arm. Yes, I said, to the park and for ice cream. We spent 2 hours of normalcy, which was a luxury. I pushed her on the swing. She told me about a new game. I took her to Daniel's house at the agreed time. Camila opened the door. Thanks for bringing her on time, she said without emphasizing anything. I have a right to be with my daughter, I managed to blurt out. It wasn't a response to anything, it was an empty defense. Yes, she nodded. And Sophie needs predictability. Thanks for today. I stood on the threshold wanting to say 1,000 things and left in silence. That night, when I got to the apartment, I found Julian shirtless with a rehearsed smile. Good news, he announced. The project moved forward. I need you to sign as an internal contact to bypass a bottleneck. It's a formality. I don't work there anymore, I said. It's to activate the circuit, he insisted, pulling out a sheet. It's just faster with your signature. It's good for you too. Are you asking me to falsify my position? I asked, lowering my voice. Don't be dramatic, it's just putting your name as a contact. Nobody checks those things. I looked at him for a second that seemed long. In that second, I put together firings, emails, maxed out credit cards, and his beer every night, the new cologne, the absences. I said no. I'm not going to sign. You're ungrateful, he replied as if he had been waiting for that word. This is all for you. I'm betting time and reputation on us. Us, I said slowly, left me without a job, without a house, and with a termination letter in my bag. And now you're asking me to help you get deeper into the company that fired me. No. Then sort it out yourself, he snapped and went into the bathroom. We slept back to back. The next day, the silent withdrawal of his things began. First a set of keys, then a jacket, then books. I asked one night, Are you leaving? I need space, he said. You're too heavy. And the rent? I asked. I'll transfer you when the payment comes through, he promised, looking at his phone. It never came. He left me with a month's rent overdue and a notice stuck on the door. 2 weeks later, I called and argued with the management. I asked for an extension. I sold a watch that had been an anniversary gift from Daniel and that I hadn't dared to look at in months. It was enough for a bed in a shared room on the outskirts. I stopped hearing from Julian. His number eventually went to voicemail. I, who in another life coordinated projects with timelines and roadmaps, made a humble plan. Cheap coffee, A minimal data plan, impeccable visits with SoFi, therapy every week. A co-parenting course in a room with parents who told similar stories with different pronouns. I went to job interviews with a trim CV to avoid mentioning the consultant. I encountered looks that stuck on the question, "Why did you leave the company?" and with salaries that barely paid for the bed. Meanwhile, Laura was moving forward with the divorce. One day she called me. "Your ex is proposing an agreement. Primary physical custody with him, shared legal custody, visits on alternate weekends and one weekday, fixed schedules. Division of assets. He gives you the car if you sign away the property in his name. No alimony between you. You would have an obligation to contribute to SoFi's expenses according to your income." "The house in his name?" I asked, swallowing my pride. "I also paid that mortgage." "A legal battle is not in your best interest," said Laura. "You risk coming out worse. If you fight, the judge can look at your recent history and impose stricter measures. Your best move is stability, agreements, and in a year, ask for an extension if you demonstrate change." I didn't like it. I signed it. It was my long-term revenge on myself. The day of the preliminary hearing was surgical. Daniel arrived with Camila. They didn't ignore me, nor did they come over to say hello. I greeted my daughter in a hallway with a mediator watching. SoFi showed me a shiny sticker. Camila brought a folder from which came out schedules, shifts, school reports, a weekly plan with meals, homework, games. I brought proof of my course, therapy receipts, a sheet with my latest online pickups. The judge, a man with a tired voice, said what we already knew. "We are looking for the best interest of the child." We signed the agreement. My hand trembled when I put my name down. Camila didn't sign anything. She didn't have to. She stood by Daniel's side, discreet, precise. On the way out, I approached a meter closer. "Thank you for taking care of SoFi," I said, looking at her for the first time without the filter of rivalry. "She's my family," she replied without raising her voice. "And you're her mother. We need you to be stable." "I'm trying." "It shows," she said. "Keep it up." There was no irony, it was worse. It was an invitation to mature. I took 2 steps back, as if those words had pushed me. Months later, life settled into a new normality that was unlike any I had ever wanted. I found a job in a call center. It wasn't humiliating, it was honest. I learned to breathe between calls, to measure my pride, to celebrate minuscule achievements. Today I wasn't late. Today SoFi ate with me without screens. Today I paid for the room on time. I printed a calendar and stuck stickers on it when I completed the visitation days as if I were a child collecting stars. Sometimes at night I would cry from exhaustion. I would dry my tears and repeat Mariana's phrase to myself, someone who made bad decisions and is now taking responsibility. Julian reappeared when exhaustion had made me almost efficient. He called me from an unknown number. I answered out of inertia. "Vane," he said as if we had spoken yesterday. "I need to see you." I didn't answer. "No questions." "I owe you money," he added. "And I have a proposal. I got a contract in another city. We can start over." I laughed without humor. I looked at my fingers with their short nails. "I've already started over," I said. "Without you. Don't be proud." "The only thing I have left is my orderly pride," I replied. "I've already given away the rest." He hung up with a theatrical sigh. 2 days later, I received an email from a company saying they had been contacted by my partner to ask for a reference for me. I replied with one line, "I am unaware of the request." I blocked him. He didn't come back. Daniel's revenge had no screams or insults. It had documentation. One day, Laura showed me a file that his lawyer had submitted, a table with my failures to comply in the first few months, emails where I asked for last-minute changes, messages where Camila offered me options and I didn't respond. That file was not meant to humiliate me, it was meant to make it clear that the rules were going to be respected. I read that document with a mixture of shame and strange gratitude. The sharpest way to hit back was to keep the house running like clockwork without me, and that was exactly what they had done. One Saturday, it was my turn to take SoFi to a board game event at the library. Daniel and Camila arrived together. SoFi ran to the shelves. I watched them from a distance. He was joking with the librarian. She was arranging a water bottle and a snack. They brushed against each other as they passed. It wasn't a display, it was a natural gesture. That hurt more than any snub. There's the life I threw away, I thought, and immediately rejected it. It wasn't mine by right. I had had it because I held it up. When I stopped holding it, someone else took it gently, not with resentment, and took care of it. We finalized the divorce in a gray signing room with a plastic plant in the corner. There were no rings thrown or cinematic phrases. "Good luck," said Daniel. "You too," I said. Camila was outside with Sophie. When I came out, my daughter took my hand. "Are we getting ice cream now?" she asked as if the papers didn't exist. "Yes," I answered. "For ice cream." This is where some writers put in a time jump and tell you how everything got better with patience and learning. That's not going to happen. Not everything got better. Some things got better. Others got worse. What did happen was this. One Monday, I received an email from the school. Next month there would be a reading presentation. Parents/guardians are invited. I asked Daniel if I could go even if it wasn't my assigned day. He said yes. I took time off work. I arrived early. Sophie read a paragraph without stumbling and glanced at me to check if I was there. I nodded with my eyes. In the end, we took a photo of the four of us. Sophie in the middle, Daniel on one side, me on the other, Camila behind with a hand on Sophie's shoulder, a weird and real family. In parallel, the bills were unforgiving. The management of the previous apartment sued me for the unpaid month. I negotiated a plan. A debt collector called asking about a maxed-out credit card. I stood in line at a bank to ask for a restructuring. None of this is told much in the forums because it doesn't sound like hot drama, it sounds like a bill, which is worse. Mariana told me this is also taking responsibility. I clung to that phrase like a handrail on a crowded bus. Camila over time stopped being the nanny in my head. She was Daniel's partner and the reliable adult in my daughter's house. One afternoon when I was dropping off Sophie, I asked her, "How are you?" "Tired and happy," she replied. "That's how it is, isn't it?" "Yes," I said. And it was the first time that neither of us was faking her priority. 9 months after the divorce, Daniel and Camila had a small gathering in the park to celebrate Sophie's birthday. Nothing opulent, folding tables, sandwiches, a cake with frosting, a piñata. In the end, they invited me. I went. I bought a gift that Sophie had wanted for months, a watercolor set with a wooden case. I approached Daniel when everyone was cleaning up. "Thanks for inviting me," I said. "You're her mother," he replied as if that was enough for everything. I thought of telling him, "You look good, happy birthday to Sophie. You're doing a good job." I said the last thing. He nodded. Camila walked by with plates in a box. "Do you want a piece of cake?" she asked naturally. "Is there chocolate?" "Yes, thanks," I answered and felt that that piece of cake was a truce. Where's the revenge? They expected it with blood. There was no blood here. There was something worse. Consequences. They hit me one by one like waves until they left me very low. I lost the house, the job, the version I had of myself, and my control over my daughter's schedule. I gained a plastic chair in a shared room, a job with headphones stuck to my head, a visitation schedule that, if I don't comply, becomes a judge. The loneliness of someone who listens to their own breathing in a laundromat at midnight. And I also slowly gained something like a basic respect for boundaries. Julian, his revenge was his own nature. I found out from a former colleague that he was being investigated for inconsistent invoices in a bid. I saw him once months later in a mall with a shorter beard with another woman who was laughing loudly. He saw me. He made a minimal gesture with his head. I didn't approach. I continued to the discount store where I was looking for a cheap notebook for Sophie. Daniel got better. Not overnight, but it was obvious. He was promoted at his company. Camila told me one day while Sophie was doing her homework. "He deserves it," I said without effort and was surprised I could say it without my pride burning. Life at his house had a cadence I recognized from the door. A smell of tomato sauce on a Wednesday, backpacks ready on a Sunday, a magnet on the fridge with a schedule for tennis and reading. It wasn't the perfect house, it was the house that supports. One Christmas, Sophie showed me a photo of the three of them making cookies. I saved it on my phone, not to torture myself, but to remember that this is what she has when she's not with me. I had to learn other things, like moving between shifts so as not to miss visits, like saying no to a supervisor who wanted to trade my hours of seeing my daughter for a bonus, like sleeping with noise. Sometimes in the early morning, I would get scared thinking that this is me now and that there would be no miracle that would return me to a more comfortable place. Then I would breathe and think of Sophie, reading without stumbling, of the golden sticker she won, of the hug she gives me when I tell her, "See you on Tuesday." Sometimes that was enough, sometimes not, but it was what there was. A year after the collapse, Laura called me. "If you've maintained a perfect record for a year, we can ask to expand your time." I sent her my spreadsheet with stickers, up-to-date rent receipts, letters from work that said met objectives, a note from the therapist certifying attendance. Daniel did not object. The judge extended it by 2 more afternoons a month. It's not the epic that movies promise. It's another sticker. The ending has no lukewarm redemption for me. I'm not looking for it. If someone wants me to repent in a tearful paragraph, I'm not going to give them that satisfaction. I've already cried enough, and I still do sometimes without witnesses. If someone wants poetic justice, here is the version I do have. The day we consolidated the new schedules, I went to pick up Sophie. On the way out, Daniel told me, "Camila and I are getting married in the spring." I felt a sting that ran up to the back of my neck. I nodded. "Congratulations," I said. "Really? We want Sophie to experience it with joy," he added. "And for you to be okay with it. We are not replacing you in any way." "I know," I said. "And I know exactly what it feels like to replace a home for an impulse. I'm not going to ruin this for anyone, least of all Sophie." There was no formal invitation to the wedding, nor did I ask for one. I didn't go. I later saw a photo in the parents' group, the two of them, simple, smiling, Sophie in a light blue dress and a crown of flowers. It hurt, and at the same time, I was relieved that the world could be ordered without me. That's the part no one tells you in the forums, the relief. My ruin is not spectacular. I didn't literally end up homeless. I didn't end up in a tabloid. My ruin was quieter. Losing privileges, giving up a property, signing papers without drafting them, counting coins, going back to a helpline to ask about a payment plan, burying my heroic version and my punishment, if you want to call it that. It had a relentless prosecutor, the calendar. Every square that says Tuesday 5, pick up Sophie 3 p.m., and that if I don't comply, it doesn't wait for me with flowers, it waits for me with a judge's stamp. Sometimes when Sophie falls asleep with me, I stay and watch her and talk to her softly as if she could hear me. "I learned late," I whisper. But I learned. One night after taking her back, Camila caught me at the door. "Vanessa," she said, "Sophie, did she tell you that next week she has an art exhibition?" "Yes," I replied. "I'm on shift. I'm going to ask to switch. If they don't give it to you, I'll send you a video," she said. "Anyway, I hope you're there." "I'll be there," I assured her, and I kept my word. On the day of the exhibition, Sophie looked for me in the crowd. I raised my hand. Camila was by my side, Daniel on the other. Sophie talked about her watercolors. She took a step back. The three of us applauded at the same time. There was no triumphant music. There was a normal applause in a small room of a school. There was no happy ending for me. There was an ending that accepts that the damage done is not repaired with speeches, but with routines. And there was a good ending for Daniel, which is more important than my pride would have admitted a year ago. He got what I now call a life. He will say it's simply his house. I see it when I go to drop off Sophie. A table with crayon marks, a magnet with a practice schedule, a bill paid on time, a woman who didn't come in to take anything away, but to add. They didn't sink me. I sank myself. They simply held on. Someone on a forum would say, she deserved it. I'm not going to argue. I'm telling it without excuses because maybe it will help someone to see themselves in this mirror without makeup. The impulse promises you an urgent way out, but the bill doesn't expire. And it may be that on the other side there is no villain who pays for you. There may just be people who do things right and don't have time to prove anything to you. I have to keep adding stickers. Right now I have one on my forehead that says, "You arrived on time." Sophie stuck it there between laughs. Camila passed her the tape. Daniel said, "It's crooked." And Sophie straightened it with her small fingers. The four of us laughed. Then everyone went their separate ways. I walked to the bus stop with the sticker still there. People looked at me funny and I didn't care. It's not a trophy. It's my small proof that with the damage done, I can still be where I said I was going to be. And there is no harsher revenge for someone like me than that, obeying the clock, paying the bill, holding the chair, even if it's plastic, and watching from the corner of my eye as others whom I hurt got the house that I let go. That's the end, not because of emotional closure, but because there's nothing more to tell that isn't repetition, working, visiting, paying, sleeping. And in the middle, a girl with watercolors who reads without stumbling and knows, because we are teaching her, that life doesn't fall apart if you hold it up. They held it up. I learned not to let go when it's my turn. That's enough. For me, that is hitting bottom and staying there until the bottom, with patience, becomes ground and moving forward without asking for applause.